It was Sunday, and the air in the basement of the Igreja de São José had the sticky, damp smell of too many bodies packed into too small a space. I could feel rivulets of sweat trailing down my temples, tickling my jaw. The benches were arranged in the shape of an L, so the person sitting in the curve, in this case me, would be the most visible, the focus of every glance. White tiles reflected the harsh light of bulbs overhead. Fans strained at the thick air, their creak a rhythm more unsettling than soothing. My mother sat to my right, eyes fixed on her purse clasp, hands knotted like roots. My father hunched beside her, his expression flat. In front, Dona Celeste, her voice high and insistent, was conducting the assembly, the community forum, she'd called it. Others called it the ring. We all care about Davi, she said, voice bright, and that is why we need to address these difficult things. For his sake. The circle nodded agreement. Even Tio Paulo, who'd rarely spoken at all, ran a palm over his silver hair and looked down at his loafers in grave approval. My cheeks burned, fingers twisting at the unraveling end of my sweater. It's one thing for a boy to have dreams, Dona Celeste went on, but to be delusional at 19, Davi, you have to take responsibility for your life. She means get a real job, called out Rogerio from the back. He worked at the bakery, arms dusted with flour, always with that barking kind of laugh. Today he forced a solemn face, but I'd known him since we snuck cachaça from his father's cupboard, and the edge of cruelty in his smile strung more than if he'd openly mocked me. They all waited for me to reply. For a second the room seemed squeezed into an aquarium, everyone gaping, waiting for my next move. My mouth felt dry. I know it sounds strange, I managed, but writing is what I do best. I've worked on my book for 3 years, if I finish. The laughter started with Sandra, then rippled through the benches. My mother shrank deeper into herself. A book, she gasped, chest heaving. You. Our Davi, the next Jorge Amado que coisa. The laughter shifted. Some people did it to fit in, to avoid meeting my eyes, even the ones who'd sometimes encouraged me. Even Matthias, my cousin, whose secret guitar practice I'd never told. Why does he think he's better than us? Someone muttered, and another followed. Maybe the heat cooked his head. Celeste clapped her hands. Enough, Davi, listen to us. This is your family. You work in the bakery with Rogerio, safe money. If not, your uncle will give you shifts painting. These are real jobs. I almost blurted, that's your limit, not mine. Instead, I heard myself say, I'll try harder. I promise. 2 weeks later, I left. I packed a small duffel, told my mother goodbye without waking her, and got on the dawn bus to Lapa with enough cash for 3 days' rent. The city, in winter, was a bleeding orange in the sky. I found a tiny room above a hardware store, the walls thin as cardboard, the stairwell reeking of cigarettes and boiled beans. At night, the roar of traffic below, voices rising from alleyways, became the background music to the rattle of keys as I wrote, sometimes until the pale, exhausted hour between 3 and 4. Those early weeks slid by in a haze. I worked the counter at a juice stall, passing money and goyaba across the glass, stealing time for paragraphs scratched on cigarette box slips. Sometimes it seemed possible, the glint of a scene, a line of dialogue that nearly sang. But more often I stared at the winking cursor, heart lurching, sure that everything they'd said at the church was true. Who would read the story of a boy from Tijuca? Who cared about my wreath, the one outside the postcards? I wrote anyway, hunger an insistent partner. When I could, I'd treat myself to warm pão de queijo and black coffee at the bodega on Rua do Love Radio. I learned to listen, to the shouting cart vendors, to old women discussing politics at bus stops, to the click of rosary beads in the hands of the dying. The city became a living thing in my chest. I tried to catch its voice on the page. One November night, sheets of rain struck the air like marbles. My ceiling leaked. I placed a chipped mug beneath the worst patch and sat at my desk, staring at the blinking message on my computer screen. We are not accepting submissions at this time. Another rejection. I buried my face in my arms and let myself break just for a moment. I saw my father's blankness, the arch of Dona Celeste's eyebrow, the peal of Sandra's laughter. The memories pulsed heavy and raw. When I lifted my head, I thought about going back. Maybe they were right. Maybe my story was another in a million threads. And who was I to think mine would be woven into anyone's tapestry? But something hard clicked into place. Grief, I'd learned, was a foundation. For the first time I saw it clearly. I wasn't writing for them or even for myself, but for the city itself, for the battered beauty of Rio at dawn, for the strangers in the alleyways and under the viaducts, for the songs sung by people who never made the news. So I wrote every night, every stolen moment. I stopped counting the rejections. I stopped asking how many pages I had left. 3 years passed like a river, both slow and relentless. By then, I'd moved twice, always to cheaper, smaller rooms. My duffel was ragged but still held, and now it was filled with drafts. In 2017, during the sweltering cusp of summer, I received an email that began, "Dear Davi Santos, we would be honored to publish your manuscript." The rest of the paragraph blurred in my visions. The process unfolded with painful slowness. There were edits, contract negotiations, hours spent learning to navigate an industry suspicious of outsiders, especially those without MFA degrees, without connections. The book, O Filho do Beiro, landed on shelves the next May. Its cover, an image of the blue-tiled stairwell from my first rented room, gleamed on the table of Livraria Travessa in Leblon. The invitations trickled in, at first tiny libraries in Flamingo, church basements not unlike the one I'd left, then writers' panels, podcasts, interviews. The reviews came: tentative praise, surprise at authenticity, questions about where I found my characters. Every time I was introduced as the author from Tijuca, the memory of the church circle rose up again, a shadowy crowd in the margins of each good moment. Through all those months of readings and signings, festivals and calls from people I'd never met, my family remained silent. My mother would text "Tudo bem," but avoided the subject. My father never called. Tia Paulo sent me a picture of a newspaper clipping but wrote no message. In October, my publisher scheduled a hometown reading. They wanted it in the very neighborhood I'd fled, at the new community center, built from the bones of the old church basement, where the walls now shimmered with children's art and photos of class graduations. I told myself I would not go. Then I saw the event poster online, my face, an awkward mid-laugh picture under the bold title, "O Filho volta pra casa." All week, memories churned inside me. I remembered every slight, every eye roll, every quecoisa ridicula, every person who'd said, "Why can't you be normal?" I considered cancelling. The day of the event, I woke with my heart pounding an urgent rhythm. Rain pattered at the window, and the sky was the same molten grey as the morning I'd left for Lapa. I dressed in my best shirt, the one I'd bought after my first advance check, not trusting myself in front of the mirror. The center looked new to the point of strangeness, the paint clean and still smelling faintly of chemicals, the benches bright blue. The stage was modest, 2 folding tables, a pitcher of water. Someone had arranged gerbera daisies in mason jars. Behind all this, photographs hung, faded scenes of carnival, kids playing futebol, couples dancing. Above it all, a banner read, "Welcome home, Davi." I arrived early. The director, a woman named Rita, greeted me with the poised smile of someone who'd orchestrated many events. I tried to match her energy but felt like an actor on a too bright stage. "Full house," she said, eyes twinkling. "They all want to see if the prodigal son's stories are true." Her words meant kindly twisted in my stomach. As the hour approached, people filtered in, the chatter growing, old friends hugging in the aisles. I recognized a few faces. Senor Edmundo from the fruit stand, Dona Estella from my old apartment block, Rogerio still flower-dusted, hands broad and calloused, now carrying a little boy on his hip. My mother came, standing at the back, silent. My father hovered beside her, hands deeper than ever in his pockets. Aunt Sandra, a plastic smile spreading over her face, bent rapidly to kiss everyone in her row. At 7 sharp, Rita introduced me. I stood, blinking against the lights, the book heavy in my hands. My voice shook as I began. "I was born 2 blocks from here above a churrasquinho stand." I read, my words as much for myself as for them. My father used to say, "Every boy in Rio is born with a story, but most die before they find the words." I told the story of my character Lucas, a boy who loved books, who found magic in the cracks of the favelas. I read a passage about his mother, her disappointment, her secret pride disguised behind sharp words. I saw in the front row Dona Celeste's chin tremble. It was slight but clear. Questions followed. Edmundo asked if the bakery in Chapter 4 was modeled after Rogerio's. Others wanted to know who Tia Marta was based on. The laughter now was a different kind, soft, inclusive, belonging. Then Rita brought out the second table, one I hadn't seen arrive. It was stacked edge to edge with copies of my book shining under the lights, dozens of them. She placed a pen in my hand and guided the first child forward. The line stretched to the wall. Halfway through, Rogerio himself stepped forward. He grinned. "For my son," he said, holding out the book, "but also for me. You made us famous." I signed his name with careful letters. People brought old photographs, torn clippings, even napkins for me to sign. Children came, eyes huge, asking, "Did you really make it in the city?" They whispered as if this too was magic. My mother watched, hand at her mouth. The crowd swelled toward the back, people peering over shoulders, craning to see. Donor Celeste queued as well, book clutched against her chest. When my father approached at last, he stood aside as the others flooded around. His suit was the same one he wore to funerals, and his hands were mottled. He didn't hand me a book. Instead, he said, voice low enough for only me, "Your mother keeps your articles. She reads them to Tia Maria." I think maybe I was wrong. He paused, and the sound of the crowd, the laughter, the chatter, the children's shouts filled the space between us. I pressed a hand over his, and for the first time since I was a child, he met my eyes. When the table was finally clear, Rita announced, "For those who missed today, Davi's book is available at the market and here at the center." She lifted a copy overhead. Cameras flashed. The proof was as concrete as anything could be. An old friend who'd laughed at my dreams now turned pages with reverence. The record lay there, underlined, spine, paper and ink, visible to everyone. A hot ache built in my chest, not pride, something different, older. Grief, yes, for what had been lost, but clarity as well. I saw it now. Living your truth does not erase the scars of expulsion, but it carves out a path home nonetheless. When the event ended, people lingered. They pressed my hands, hugged me, some awkwardly, others with the fierce urgency of those asking forgiveness without words. My mother finally reached me, arms thin and trembling. She cradled my face in her hands and simply nodded, tears shining in her eyes. Outside, the rain had cleared. The night shimmered with that peculiar blue pallor that belongs only to Rio, threaded with distant music and the hum of possibility. I walked home through streets both changed and unchanged, my heart full, the book under my arm, proof that dreams, once scorned, could become the totems people carried, the stories they claimed as their own. That night, as I lay in my old room, walls patched with paint, a single moth beating at the screen, I realized that coming home was its own kind of miracle. Success was not a medal or a headline, but the gentle hush of acceptance, the laughter of children, the warmth of belonging returned at last. And for the first time in years, I felt free.